If being misunderstood still bothers you, you are easier to control than you think. The moment someone sees you the wrong way, what happens? You react, you explain, you defend, you rush to correct their perception. Why? Because their misunderstanding doesn't just annoy you, it destabilizes you. That means something dangerous. Your identity is still dependent on external agreement. You still need people to see you correctly, to feel internally stable. Because anyone who can distort how they see you can disturb your peace. Anyone who can force you to explain yourself can control the frame. Anyone who can trigger your need to be understood can manipulate you. Most people hear that and immediately disagree, because they've never examined how much of their emotional stability depends on other people's perception. Most won't stay for this. They want comfort, not truth. This channel is for people willing to study what others avoid. Subscribe if you belong here. And if you fail to understand what we're about to break down, you'll keep making the same mistake. Surrendering your peace to people who are never trying to understand you. Because the second misunderstanding stops feeling dangerous, you become free. Pay attention to what misunderstanding does to you. Not on the surface, underneath. Someone gets you wrong. Immediately something shifts, your body tightens, your mind speeds up. And now you're stuck. Replaying the conversation, rewriting the text, building arguments in your head, trying to fix a perception that already escaped your control. Why? Because being misunderstood does not feel neutral to you. It feels costly, and your nervous system knows it. The pain is rarely about the misunderstanding itself. It's about what your mind thinks comes after. Rejection, disrespect, distance, loss. That's why a simple misjudgment can feel unbearable. Not because it destroyed you, because your system registered threat. And here is the part most people miss. The threat isn't always real, but your reaction is. That reaction tells the truth. It reveals where you are still attached, still dependent, still vulnerable. You say, "I just want to clear things up." No, not always. Sometimes you want something else, relief. You want the discomfort to stop. You want internal stability restored. You want control back. That's why you explain. That's why you defend. That's why silence feels unbearable. Because silence forces you to sit with something you hate, not knowing how you exist in someone else's mind. Sit with that, because this is where it gets ugly. The moment your peace depends on being understood, you have handed other people access to your nervous system. And this is where the trap begins. Here's the addiction, and most people are too dishonest to admit it. You say, "I just want to be understood." No, you want control. Control over perception, control over image, control over narrative. You want to control the version of you that exists in other people's minds. That is the addiction. Not understanding. Control. Bertrand Russell said, "The approval of others is a stimulus to action, not a guide to truth." Most people live backwards. They don't chase truth. They chase approval, and they call it fairness. Be honest. When someone gets you wrong, what really hurts? The misunderstanding, or the fact that you can't control what they now believe about you? That's the wound, because now your image is unstable. And you hate that. You are not addicted to being understood. You are addicted to controlling perception. And addiction creates predictable behavior. Predictable people are easy to play. Which brings us to the next problem. Explaining. Most people think explaining makes them look mature. Wrong. Over-explaining is often panic-wearing, articulate language. Look at what explanation communicates. You affected me. Your opinion matters to me. I need you to see me correctly. You can disturb my peace. That is what people hear. Not your words, your need. And need leaks. Always. This is the paradox. The more desperately you explain, the more power you lose. Not because explanation is weak, need is weak. Clear communication says, I choose to explain. Dependence says, I need you to understand. Massive difference. One comes from power, the other comes from fear. So answer this honestly. When someone misunderstands you, what hits first? Anger, anxiety, or the urge to explain? One word. There's another possibility you need to consider. They may not be misunderstanding you at all. Let that sink in. Sometimes they understood exactly what you meant. They just refused to respond to what you actually said, because that would cost them leverage. Think about how some arguments start. You say something simple, a boundary, an opinion, a refusal, nothing dramatic, and somehow 10 seconds later, you're defending something you never even said. How does that happen? Because the conversation quietly shifted. You were speaking about the issue. They moved it to your character. You said, I need space. They heard, so you don't care. You said, I disagree. They turned it into, so you think you're smarter than everyone. You said no. Now you're arrogant, cold, selfish, difficult. Notice the pattern. You start with one sentence. They hand you an accusation, and suddenly you're burning energy trying to clean up a distortion you never created. That's not always confusion. Sometimes that's strategy. Because the moment you become emotional and defensive, something changes. You stop communicating. You start proving. And the person forcing you to prove yourself has already taken control. That's the part people miss. Control in conversation rarely looks aggressive. Sometimes it looks like confusion. Sometimes it sounds innocent. Wait, that's not what you meant, right? Looks harmless. Until you realize you've spent 20 minutes explaining yourself to someone who had no intention of understanding you. Now here's where people still cling to false hope. They think, if I can just explain it better, they'll finally get it. Maybe. But not always. Some people do not want clarity. Clarity ruins the story they need. The insecure partner needs to believe you're pulling away. The controlling parent needs to believe your boundary is disrespect. The jealous friend needs to believe your growth is arrogance. The manipulative co-worker needs to believe your confidence is hostility. Why? Because that version of you is useful to them. Anais Nin said it well. We do not see things as they are, we see them as we are. Exactly. A lot of people never meet the real you. They meet their projection of you, their fear wearing your face, their insecurity wearing your voice. And this is brutal to accept. Some misunderstandings survive not because truth is unclear, but because the misunderstanding itself is useful for guilt, useful for control, useful for keeping you small. If you've lived through that, you already know why this matters. Like this video. Share it with someone who needs to hear this. So what do the Stoics understand that most people don't? Something simple. Brutal, but simple. Not everything happening around you belongs to you. That sounds obvious, until you realize how much suffering comes from violating that line. Someone judges you, and instantly you treat their judgment like your responsibility. Someone projects their insecurity onto you, and now you feel responsible for correcting it. Someone invents a story about you, and somehow you feel obligated to manage that story. Why? Since when did their mind become your territory? Epictetus built almost everything on one separation. What is yours? What isn't? That's it. Miss this, and people will drain you for the rest of your life. Your actions, yours. Your intentions, yours. Your character, yours. Your discipline, yours. Their opinion of you, not yours. Their projection, not yours. Their interpretation, not yours. Their judgment, not yours. And this is where most people break. They keep trying to control things that were never available for control. That's why they stay exhausted, trying to manage perception, trying to manage narratives, trying to manage other people's internal world. Impossible job. And expensive. Stoicism is not emotional numbness. It is jurisdiction. Knowing where you end and where other people begin. Massive difference. The moment you stop treating other people's perceptions as your responsibility, something shifts. You stop chasing correction. You stop performing for approval. You stop negotiating with projections. And peace starts showing up. Not because people changed. They didn't. You changed. You stopped reaching for control where none existed. Peace begins where control ends. And this is where freedom actually begins. Not when people finally understand you. Forget that. Some people will die committed to the wrong version of you. Let them. That's the part most people fight. They still believe every lie must be corrected. Every accusation must be challenged. Every silence must be explained. Every boundary must be justified. No, that compulsion is the cage. Watch what changes when that compulsion dies. Someone twists your words, you notice it. But you don't rush in. Someone calls you selfish for having boundaries. You hear it, but you don't collapse into defense. Someone decides you're cold because you stopped over-explaining. You see it, and you leave it alone. That's new. Because the old you couldn't tolerate misperception. The old you needed correction, needed fairness, needed to be seen properly, needed people to get it. Not anymore. And this is the irony. The less desperate you are to be understood, the clearer you become, the calmer you become, the harder you become to control. Because people lose access to the mechanism they used against you. Guilt stops working. Shame stops working. Emotional bait stops working. Why? Because you finally understood something most people never do. Being misunderstood is not always punishment. Sometimes it's permission. Permission to stop performing. Permission to stop shrinking. Permission to stop negotiating with people committed to misunderstanding you. Sometimes misunderstanding is filtration. It removes people who only liked the version of you they could control. Some people only loved your lack of boundaries. Some only liked your guilt. Some only felt comfortable when you were easy to manipulate. The moment you changed, they called you difficult. Georg Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel said, "To be independent of public opinion is the first formal condition of achieving anything great." Exactly, because greatness requires separation. Separation from approval. Separation from perception. Separation from the need to be constantly understood. And the second you become comfortable being misunderstood, something breaks, not in you, around you. The manipulation breaks, the leverage breaks, the control breaks. Because you stop negotiating your identity with other people. And that is freedom. Most people will agree with this and change nothing. Don't be one of them. Watch the next video. Subscribe if you haven't. Go through the full playlist. This isn't understood in one sitting. It has to be trained.